Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Goldberg. I'm the editor-in-chief of National Geographic. Thank you, Secretary Jolt. That was I think you call a barn burner.
Thank you.
I had never heard this phrase, being in the forever business. It's a really nice way to put the, looking at the notion of preserving public lands. I was struck by one of the things that you said about loving our parks to death. I mean, we do have these record numbers of people going to parks, although they look more like you and me than younger people. And David Quammen in our Yellowstone issue writes about Yellowstone being loved to death by the number of visitors, by the development around the edges. So how do we encourage people to love and go to these parks, but at the same time not love them to death?
A lot of it starts with education. When I was last in Yellowstone, which wasn't that long ago, probably 2011, I'm sorry, John, but I think only about half the bathrooms worked.
And that is actually one of the things with the infrastructure problems, the $12 billion.
$12 billion in deferred maintenance. And we have tremendous number of foreign tourists that visit, and they're not expecting what they find, which oftentimes is very visible deferred infrastructure, or a real dichotomy between maybe a new visitor center here and something that's fallen apart over there. It's a real challenge, and I think it starts with education, and it also starts with advocacy. I know there's people here from the Outdoor Industry Association, National Parks Conservation Association, many other nonprofit groups who spend time up on Capitol Hill making their voices known. And I can't tell you how important that is, because when constituents come forward saying, this is not putting our best foot forward as a community, if we're a gateway community, just outside Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Driggs, Idaho, or Bozeman, Montana, we want people to come and visit our areas because our businesses depend on it. And those voices need to be heard in Washington, D.C., so that we can get appropriate funding. But I'd also say that the Park Service, and this is true in the article that Bernard DeVoto wrote back in 1956, or 53, I guess he wrote the article in 53, that the Park Service does a really good job of kind of cobbling together resources and making it work as best they can. $12 billion of deferred maintenance backlog is necessary. About half of that's roads. We do have some funding in the transportation bill that's going to be important. We also leverage volunteers, but we make those dollars go a pretty long way. So I'd say that every person that I've met that works in a park, every person I've met that works on a wildlife refuge or in BLM lands is a jack of all trades. They maybe work in the visitor center, later in the day fixing a broken toilet, then building a trail. That's the way we run. But you still can't do it with a very small budget, and that's what we face. So I think, I said to John, we're likely to have a huge number of visitors in 2016. Are we going to put our best foot forward for the centennial? And the answer is we may not in some cases, but if that helps wake up the American people, as it did back in 1953, then maybe they will support these in the way the American people expect of us.
Or maybe you could just, spur an effort for people to take pictures and put them on Instagram of problems that they see in the parks, like fix this park, hashtag fix this park.
Yeah, as long as they, kind of send that to people that control the budget.
Well,
but not just to me.
That's true. I'm just giving you grief there. I was interested in what you said about America's outdoor economy and trying to really quantify it. What do we gain from the economies around the impact of hunting and fishing and other outdoor recreation? What's interesting, though, is sometimes those communities and the conservation community haven't really seen eye to eye. How do you think that would work?
I talked about conversations in my speech and the importance of people getting around the table to find common ground. Years ago, when I was in the outdoor recreation business early on, and I went to REI in 2000, we really hadn't done a good job of quantifying, what it was that we did for the economy. And we kept coming to Washington, D.C. as purveyors of outdoor gear, talking about the importance of conservation. But we didn't talk about the other green side, which is the green of money. So it was in the middle of that decade that the Outdoor Industry Association launched the first study and then broadened that network to launch a second study that was more inclusive of outdoor recreation, to say that this is actually a $646 billion industry that employs 6.1 million people. That's where the statistics come from, that it is bigger, or about as big, as pharmaceuticals plus motor vehicles and their parts combined. That got a lot of attention. The association did it on a state-by-state basis. When I was going through my confirmation hearings, I printed out those sheets and took them with me. I think that helped the business side come forward, and I'd say generally there has been good alliance between the outdoor recreation economy and the conservation community, but when there isn't, there've been a lot of conversation around the table to work those out. And early on, conversations about, bolting routes for rock climbers in national park, is that okay or not okay? If you're a wilderness purist, it might not be okay, but is there a way we can allow it? Or the conflicts between mountain bikes and hikers, or snow machiners and cross-country skiers. That gets sorted out when you sit around the table and you understand that there's also places that perhaps shouldn't have any access that really are important to set aside for conservation. This all revolves around conversations.
Mm-hmm. You've had a lot of really interesting jobs, but when I think about the amount of conflict that you have to deal with in this job, is this the toughest job that you've ever had?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, by far. Running a business, dead easy compared to this job. And as my husband, who's sitting over there, will tell you, a little more financially rewarding. The reality is the world is complex, and it is not what you hear about with a lot of the political campaigns at every level. People try and oversimplify things that are really complex. I was just walking to the zoo the other day with some friends who were out of town, and somebody popped out of his house on the middle of the street and introduced himself to me. I was with sunglasses with a horde of people. I have no idea, and nobody knew I was going to be there. And he said, thanks for the work you're doing. By the way, you need to keep all oil and gas in the ground. I'm not kidding, almost just like that. And I said, is this your car? He said it wasn't his car, but I think it's the car in front of the house that he came out of. It's not as simple as that. We need to have a strong economy, but we need to understand and deal with the issues of climate change, which are caused by fossil fuels, which we do use, all of us use, even whether we don't want to, in our everyday lives. And this job is very difficult in that way. And you're not just focusing on one thing, the bottom line of your business, or if you're an enlightened company, how it fits within a broader world.
Well, I'm sure that you never thought about what you called the extreme movement to seize public lands before this job. Our Yellowstone issue, it says Yellowstone, and then the subhead on that is the battle for the American West. And the lessons that came out of the Oregon takeover, how would you compare that to what happened with the Nevada takeover from the Bundys? What did you learn from that?
Well, the fact is that there are probably 1,000 ranchers and people that work public lands that work within the system, that work with us in a cooperative way for every one that might not like the way the system works. It might even be more that are cooperative. And the situation at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge was an interesting one. The refuge manager, Chad Cargus, had worked for more than a decade with a rancher named Gary Marshall to form a high desert partnership to say, how can we work these lands so that ranching is compatible with wildlife? How can we bring back the natural sheetwater flow in the Harney Basin to facilitate the waterfowl migration that goes through there, and do that in a way which actually enhances agriculture? In areas of Nevada, we have tremendous relationships with ranchers who supported the Basin and Range National Monument, for example, in Nevada, a vast area that is home to ranchers, but is also home to incredible wildlife, incredible scenery, incredible vastness, and the largest wall of pictographs that I have ever seen. It filled my whole view. these are places that can be done in harmony. And that's where conversations on the ground that are taking place between our BLM field offices, our wildlife refuges, our national parks, our U.S. Forest Service lands, taking part within these communities so that we don't end up in conflict. So the situation that occurred in Nevada is an anomaly. It is something that's working its way through the courts right now. The situation that occurred in the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge did not get the support of the local community. The sheriff was against it, the county commissioners were against it, the people were against it, and when I went out there, what I heard from the people was, we are so proud of the collaborative efforts that we had here. We want to spread the word about what you can do when you collaborate across the landscapes, and that's what I am committed to helping them ensure that Harney County and the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge are known for, in addition to great birds. And I hope for those of you that are birders, or even those of you who are not, if you get to that remote part of Oregon, it's incredible, so please go.
You know, there are so many difficult issues. You know, another one is with the Endangered Species Act, and for instance, I know there's hearings right now about taking the grizzlies off of that list. That is, assuming that happens, that is likely to cause quite a dust-up, wouldn't you think, going forward?
Well, the Endangered Species Act is good for dust-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so when the...
Probably some critter called a dust-up.
There probably is, and it's probably endangered. But so when, you know, I hate to say it, when the first grizzly bear, though, you know, walks out of Yellowstone and gets shot, and then what? There will be a hue and cry. You know, and I understand there's science behind, you know, taking them off the list, but there's still only 700.
Well, okay, so I'll look at Dan Ash over there in the audience because he lives this every day. You know, the Endangered Species Act is one of the most effective pieces of legislation ever passed by Congress. It basically has kept well over 99% of species from going extinct. Very, very small number we've actually lost. The Obama administration has actually presided over the recovery of more species, I think, than all other administrations combined. So it is working. It is difficult. If it weren't for the Endangered Species Act, we wouldn't have realized that the sagebrush steppe ecosystem was an old-growth ecosystem like the forests of the Pacific Northwest that I grew up with, or the redwoods of California. If we didn't know the science and understand that, we wouldn't have appreciated that it's not about the greater sage-grouse. It's about 350 different species that depend on this ecosystem that, by the way, they can get wiped out with one wildfire that wipes out 150 years of growth. In the case of the grizzly bear, it's a charismatic megafauna, as is the gray wolf. That makes it very, very visible. But the science says that the grizzly bear has recovered in the Rocky Mountain region. And that is something that, you know, the Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed it for delisting. There aren't hearings going on exactly, but there's input that's being taken on that. But the scientists are really who govern that. I don't make any decisions about endangered species.
But do you personally think that would be the right thing?
I support the scientists in the Fish and Wildlife Service in their determination. I will say that I have spoken to the governors in that area about the importance of how the public views charismatic megafauna and how much of an impact that has on their ability to carry out their work in managing wildlife that is not on the endangered species list. And I think the governors of those states and the fish and wildlife agencies of those states are keenly aware that there could be a real backlash if an iconic grizzly that is well known in Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park strolled outside the boundary and was shot, as you mentioned. I also know that there are bumper stickers that talk about, you know, the bears all have numbers, and there's one with, you know, 0 and a slash through it, like I'm going to take out that bear. I mean, these are the emotions that run high, but that's going to be the job of the governors, working alongside our biologists to say, how do we handle this? You they want to handle it. They want to handle it in a really smart way, and that's their job. So Fish and Wildlife Service has done its job in conjunction with the states. It'll be an opportunity now for the states to do their job, and if they don't do a good job, Fish and Wildlife Service will step back in and they'll be right back on the list again.
Okay, this will be interesting. We have time, I think, just for a couple more questions. This was our first issue in our year-long series about parks. And it talks about, how wonderful it is to get outside and how being outside in nature is good for your brain. Our last issue in the series in December talks about this disconnect that you mentioned between young people and nature. Yeah. And what we did was we took a father and son writing team and sent them on a camping trip. And the father calls himself the great outdoorsman, and the son calls himself the great indoorsman, because he never ever gets his head out of his phone. Do you think you have to have Wi-Fi in the parks or anything to get young people out there? I'm actually serious, because when we went to photograph this story about young people in the parks, it was really hard because we couldn't find any. And so what we did was, how we finally found young people in the parks? Our photographer put some pictures up on Instagram and said, "I'm here, where are you?" And he was actually able to find some young people through social media in the parks and got some great pictures in the end. But just going there and looking, you really couldn't find it.
Were they in the lobbies where they could get Wi-Fi? Of the hotels? No. Okay, good.
But what did we really do? I mean, how can the parks be cool?
The parks are cool.
Well, to you, to me.
I believe we have to embrace technology and use it to the benefit of the outdoors. We might assume that a young person is playing a video game, but they may well be uploading and sending on Snapchat that picture that they just took in the national park. And if they are wired, they have an opportunity to do that. Part of our deferred maintenance has to do with aging signs. And the content of those signs sometimes is pretty dated. Think of how cool it would be if you were where that sign was and you could bring it up, geotagged on your phone, and you could actually hear the voice of a reenactor. Or you could hear a historical voice or a voice in a Native American tongue telling you what you were looking at, telling you the creation story that you can see from that vista. That's facilitated by having Wi-Fi connections in the parks. Doesn't mean it has to be everywhere, but I do think we need to embrace technology. And for more than a decade, I've been championing this. In my old day job at REI, I pounded on video game designers and said, you're inventing all these plants and animals. Couldn't you invent a really addictive game that got kids out looking at plants and animals and nature and competing with each other on who could get the most? Or maybe identifying invasive species and then pulling them out, So I guess I'm like, if you can't beat them, join them. I mean, the statistics are tough. Kids today, 6 to 18, spend 56 hours a week in front of a screen, and on average only 30 minutes a week in an unstructured outside play. And this is something the Kaiser Family Foundation studies. But Rich Louv, in his book, Last Child in the Woods, his most recent book, I think it's Vitamin N, got a big N on the cover. Got it waiting to read after I finished my National Geographic and my briefings. It provides really practical guidance on how to connect kids with nature. And I don't think it universally means unplugging. But when kids get involved in nature and get excited, the desire to pick up the device goes away. And I think that's what we all need to work toward.
All right, very last question, because we are actually out of time. So the Find Your Park campaign, what's your park? One, only one.
I love all my children equally.
No. One park.
I can't pick just one.
Oh.
I can't pick just one. It's kind of like eating a Lay's potato chip. Remember that old commercial?
All right,
and eat just
if
one.
You could go this weekend.
I'm going to go this weekend.
Okay, where are you going?
I'm going to go to probably Shenandoah. Is that where we're going to go?
All right.
Because I can get there. But I'll tell you, I find my park wherever I am. And sometimes it is a city park. Sometimes it's the National Zoo. I mean, that's what Find Your Park is all about. It's about finding a park, a public land, a wildlife refuge, a forest, a city park, a state park, a place that connects you with nature and the outdoors. And I'll tell you that when I'm done with this job, I'm going to find a lot more parks and public lands on a slow drive back to Seattle.
Well.
All right.
That was such a softball question. I'm embarrassed I asked it. All right. But so we are going to conclude with a film from the National Park Foundation to mark a special occasion.